Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal podcast. Our guest today is Harjit Singh. Harjiv is the founder and CEO of CambrianEdge, an AI native platform that helps marketing teams execute campaigns through a unified system. Harjiv, thanks for taking the time to chat.
Pleasure to be here, Krish. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Before we get into those topics, we have three of them. We're going to talk as much as we can in the next 60 minutes about each of those. But before we did that, can you give a quick intro about yourself and your business to our audience, Arjun?
Sure. Delighted to. CambrianEdge.ai is the world's first AI native marketing platform. What we're trying to do is make the lives of marketers a lot easier. And the way we do that is the tech stack that all marketers over the last 20, 25 years have been dealing with is gotten more complicated, more complex, and really, really wide. So there's apparently over 8 or 900 martech tools that marketers kind of navigate between. They tend to sort of have more complexity than simplicity. And I think with the advent of AI, it has become so much easier to put everybody on a foundational structure that allows marketers to collaborate, create, research, amplify, and analyze everything off a single platform. And that's what we've built at CambrianEdge.ai.
Lovely. I studied marketing long time ago.
Right.
I did so many courses in marketing and I graduated from college thinking, you know what? I got this, right? I know it. I did not become an entrepreneur immediately. It took
Right.
many years. Sometimes, you've got to do what you want to do right away. Otherwise, you put that off for a little bit and that little bit becomes a lot longer. But long
Right.
story short, I did become an entrepreneur a few years ago. And I thought, you know what? I've been building software. So
Right.
engineering kind
Right.
of comes a little bit naturally, more naturally than a lot of other things which I don't know much about. Marketing, I thought I've studied a lot about it, so I should know it. Boy, oh boy, I realized, I mean, it was not a surprise because what you typically learn in college is mostly only good till you graduate. Once you get out
Right.
of college, life happens and you recognize the complexity of everything else that you actually might have trivialized in the past. So there's a dichotomy of some sort in my mind. Krish has done 100 credits in marketing, but knows absolutely nothing about marketing. Both can be and are true at the exact same time. So
That is.
platforms such as yours is going to be helpful for a lot of us, right? I'm going to discover you and the platform as we chug along in this conversation. But I just did a quick screen share so folks can check out the product as well. Now we
Thank you.
have three.
Yeah.
No worries. We have three topics here.
Mhm.
Is it all right if I just picked one at random and then we start there?
Sure. Absolutely.
Let's start with the third one. Building AI native platforms in the age of fragmented marketing tools. Help us get started there. Harjiv, also if we could sort of set the context explaining what problems there are to be solved specifically and
Mhm.
how this tool addresses one or more of those problems.
Sure. Absolutely. I'm going to start with a bit of a historical context, right? So I think I've been around about 3 decades, a little over that in my professional career, and marketing's been pretty much 85% of that, and with sort of a bunch of technology within that sort of 3 decade plus experience. With the rise of the internet browser in the mid 90s, one of the big shifts in marketing happened, which was essentially you were in a world where most marketing was focused around creatives for either television, print, or radio, and or outdoors, right? Those were your four channels. The browser gave rise to the social media side. That gave rise to this entire world of martech that we today, we still use it across the board. Companies that started in marketing, and you see this, there's a major upheaval in the very large advertising network companies like WPP, Omnicom, and IPG, which announced a merger last year. All of them are struggling because the world that they grew up in is no longer the world that they're in. And what I mean by that is, in 2016, for the first time, television ads became less than digital ad spends, right? And television dominated till 2016. It was a dramatic shift, and it was preceded by the rise of social media, because search engine optimization came on the horizon right after Google came in. Google Analytics became important because you needed to see what were the keywords that were driving traffic. You were running ads. You were finding a lot of audiences around the world. And as more and more people came online between 2000 and 2015, 20, that dramatically changed everything. And then suddenly you come into 2018, 19, you get the rise of TikTok. You get the rise of video. All these format changes, the analytical part of it, to make sense of that, marketing became so complex, because the core of what marketers did in 95 or 2000 was they were very focused on the creative and how to engage literally only in 3 or 4 channels. Today, that has become a cornucopia of everything, and trying to figure out, okay, what is marketing versus what is performance marketing or corporate brand messaging, has become way more complicated. And as a consequence, CMOs, right, today last less than 18 months in a row, because there is no CMO who can really understand all of these pieces alone, right? Their teams are large. Most of them come, I think, and now it's starting to change. Most of them came originally from the creative side. The analytics piece became a huge thing from 2015 onwards till now. And people are trying to now make sense of, okay, what are we going to do with AI? And having gone through this 3-decade journey of mine, having sort of worked across the world with clients globally, one of the things that I think AI allows us to do is put all of these different tools that we have gotten used to measure, to look at analytics, on a platform that is foundationally AI native. And what I mean by that is, it allows you the composability to plug and play into any other MarTech tool, or within the AI piece, you don't need to go outside of the platform that we have built. And I think that allows more creativity, which marketers had lost over the last 20 years. I have been actually more creative since our platform came around. I have never been this creative in my 2.5 decades in marketing, 3 decades in marketing. And I think that is what we're trying to focus on. Uh, the analytics layer of having AI explain everything to a team is very powerful. The access to all of the major LLMs, so we have all the major LLMs on our platform, gives you the opportunity to get AI literate, AI fluent, and build your team's capability in a collaborative environment. So you can share, like if you have 20 people in a marketing team, you can have all of them work with you on that platform, so you can actually bring people in. The metaphor I love to use on that is, imagine you're a conductor in an orchestra at Carnegie Hall, and you have all of these musicians that you're supposed to coordinate. So the conductor is the CMO. The musicians are, different instrumentalists who are playing different music, but they all need to look at the conductor. Unfortunately, the marketing pre becoming sort of AI native, as I call it, uh, was essentially, you had all these musicians locked in a room. The conductor can see them, and the musicians can see the conductor. Our platform allows all of the musicians back on stage, and the conductor to have the visibility and the creativity and the strategy that is required on the platform.
I love the analogy for two reasons. One is because I love Western classical, So I go to the Kennedy Center with my wife all the time, and then I listen to music. I don't
Right.
understand it, but I appreciate it, and it gives me a sense of peace, and I'm there. So that
That's
example resonates with me for that reason, and but for one other reason, which is I go to the Kennedy Center. I'm like I said, I don't understand it, but yet I'm able to appreciate it.
right.
Marketing, I want to use that and take it a bit further.
Sure.
I don't understand it entirely. I'll be honest with you, Harjiv. A lot of what you said here is highly technical. So I'm going to have you dumb it down, not just for
Absolutely.
me, but for a lot of us developers who actually are sometimes single threaded, right? We're able to think in an engineering angle, and we try to make every problem an engineering problem and try to quantify the heck out of everything. It
Right.
just happens by nature. And by virtue of doing it, you feel like by making it more science and less art, you have more control over the problem domain. But I
Right.
can tell you that that's not necessarily the case. So I want to ask you the next set of things I want to ask you. I promise you are not manufactured problems or questions. They are
Sure.
genuine questions that Krish simply does not know the answers to, despite having done 100 credits in marketing in multiple countries in the world. Now, the first of the questions I have for you, Harjiv, is so let's say we are a software company, right? We build
Right.
software products. We have some B2B products, some B2C products. The platform that you talk of, is it, I'm presuming it's generic enough to facilitate all kinds of people who are in the business of marketing to be onboarded, but my interest is rather selfish. Can you speak to the specific part of it or the facet of it, if you will, that is meant, unless it's meant only for people like me, like people who are running software companies, but specifically to somebody who's building a B2B software or B2C software? Let's stick to B2B, actually, start off with there. How would we actually use the platform to get started? Conceptually, and maybe you can touch upon some features as well.
Absolutely. So, it's a great question because what I am proud of, what our team has built here is you don't have to be a marketing expert to be on the platform, but you can do marketing on it. So I'll give you an example. And you made a great point. I have studied marketing in my MBA. I've been in marketing nearly 3 decades plus. The definition of marketing really depends who you speak to. And that's become the hard part of marketing. It wasn't that way before the internet came around, right? It was a fairly simple, creative field. You did advertising, you did PR, so you had above the line, below the line, as they used to call it, right? So above the line was the advertising piece, below the line was stuff like PR and other things that he would do. The complication arose with the massive amounts of data that was produced as a consequence of Google first, and then, of course, the social media channels. And as that fragmented, that system gave rise to a lot of analytics, tracking, and just because you can measure it doesn't mean it makes sense. And I think every marketer in the world got lost in that. And I think with CambrianEdge.ai, what we are doing is bringing people back to the core. And so let me translate that, what it means. So for Snowpal, when you log in, all you do is put your URL. It'll pull up your brand DNA. You'll be able to see exactly where you stand, what your artifacts are. It'll pull up all your data from your social media. It's going to give you the analytics piece right there. And you can edit that message. You can invite your team members to look at that and say, hey, look, does this sound like us? Is this the right way we want to be perceived externally? Because that's like an important part of marketing. Then you can go into, so let's use the podcast as an example, right? You probably need to do a whole variety of things, create social media posts, write up a script. You want to probably amplify the social media posts that you create. You can do all of that, and you can have all of your team members collaborate, edit, and amplify from right there. Now, most marketing for small businesses, even mid-sized companies, essentially entails that. But as soon as you get into large enterprises, right? So say if you're Coca-Cola or if you're P&G, you need humongous amounts of analytical capabilities. And that, I think, today is unlocked with what we have on our platform. So while we built for the enterprise, because we have about 300 enterprises in 18 countries that are in beta today with us. And they range from some of the largest multinational institutions to startups. And the flexibility of an AI native platform is phenomenal for that. See, most of the world that we had till now, which is the SaaS world, was very deterministic, right? So you did a CRM like HubSpot or Salesforce, You put in information, and then you knew that that information is going to be always accurate. The challenge with AI is every time you put in a prompt, it'll give you a different response because it's a non-deterministic system. And I think marketing is probably the best suited for it because you want to make sure that you're creative in some ways, but you're also having the ability to capture your voice, your DNA for the brand, and all of those elements, your messaging that you need to take. And the way we built the system is you will have a knowledge base like the brand DNA that you can upload files, and it'll keep that consistency. And so it does not hallucinate who you are and all of that because you have already given that as context to it. And I think with AI, understanding that becomes very important. The other thing we have seen in the last 9 months of being in beta is a lot of large enterprises have board mandates to do AI adoption, but there is no shift in behavioral understanding of what that means for the organization. That's been a huge learning for us. And now what we've done is we've built that into the system that it adapts to everybody who comes in. So when people log in starting next week, you take a 2-minute AI readiness test. We have a very good sense from that test where you are in your journey, and the platform will adapt with you as you learn more about it. And I think the best part about what I love here is I love marketing. And I think anybody who comes in, whether it's a fresh, young college graduate with technical knowledge of marketing but no practical experience, they will learn a lot of stuff as soon as they come on because they will see what the platform can do based on what the platform understands about your sort of technical skills. And they can scale that up very powerfully. And I think that's phenomenal because there is going to be massive disruption as a consequence of AI, but I think it will always be human led. I don't think it's going to be relegated to the, humans aren't going to be relegated. We're still core to this world. And I think that's how we've built the platform because human judgment and taste is going to be important. And marketing, it is very important.
Okay. The next set of questions I have for you, Harjiv, is not necessarily specific to the platform, your platform or the features, but just generally about marketing that we all need to know
Sure.
as founders of companies. And I'm going to speak as an engineering founder, meaning, if you're an engineering founder versus a non-engineering founder, the way you go about your business is going to be quite different. And I've spoken to people on both sides. I understand the other side. I just don't know enough about it. So I'm just going to talk about it from my standpoint. Say, I know a fair number of people, not enough,
Mhm.
but a fair number of people who are technical, who want to get started with building something. Now, how they would have gone about doing that 3 years ago was very different. Very few, not very many people did. But I think it's going to change with vibe coding and everything in the mix of things. You don't need to know a lot for good or bad before you get started with doing that thing. So
Right.
more people are going to start doing this. Now, let's say we're building, in our case, we build APIs. One of the things we do is build B2B APIs and sell it to companies and other businesses that want to build software in quick time.
Yep.
As you know, we all our energy was focused on building the software, and then
Mhm.
we went live. You have to do a lot of firefighting, small team, big product, and then things change. You build more. We build a mobile app, and then we build APIs. So,
Right.
given the size of our team, like most teams, all your energy, you want to spend all of that energy on engineering and coding and software and features, but we don't have that luxury. I did not know that. I learned it the hard way. I thought I could continue to be in a cocoon and enjoy doing that while the company will build itself from whatever else it needs to do. But reality, as you can imagine, was very different, right? So you
Right.
have to do things that you have no clue about.
Right.
Now, over the years, I've tried to learn a few things. We try to do a few things, but I don't know whether we started in the right order of things as an expert marketer might. So that's the context, Rajiv. And here, again, this is not related to your platform or the product, but just as a question to somebody who's been in this business for a long time and knows it a whole lot more than I can imagine. How do you, let's say you were to build a B2B product tomorrow.
Right.
Let's say you let's say you're going to launch it in 3 months or 2 months. You thought about that idea today and you're sleeping on it, and you wake up tomorrow, you're like, you know what, this is good, I'm going to start building it.
Right.
Can you help us, can you walk us through where marketing comes into play, at which stage does it come into effect, and what are some of the things that you would have to do in that space of marketing, whether it's PR, whether it's advertising, everything else that goes in the gamut and the realm of marketing, as though you are teaching a baby, because a lot of us are babies in this space. We think we know it, and that's the problem,
Right.
because we might know a little bit. We know enough to be dangerous, but we're being dangerous to ourselves, not to other people, right? So if you could
Right.
just walk us through that initial phase and maybe all the way through, so it'll be like a nice story for all of us to learn and then put that into
Sure.
practice.
Happy to do that. This is something I spend a lot of time really thinking about and contemplating of. Based on my experience over the last 3 decades, how should different stages of a business do marketing? Because there are different things you do. Uh, I want to kick off by first talking about one of my favorite management thinkers, Peter Drucker, who said there's only two things a company needs to do: R&D and marketing. And because marketing gives you the sales pipeline that will allow you to grow your business. And I think both need to start simultaneously. And I see this a lot, I hear this a lot, especially from engineering driven companies, that they want to only focus on the best product. And something I share with especially startup founders that I work with is, you know, perfect is the enemy of the good. As an engineer, you would understand that, because engineering requires perfection. You need to be absolutely accurate. You can't make mistakes. In marketing, you can make mistakes. It's not life threatening in most cases, but the marketing allows you to build credibility and trust with your prospects and potential customers. That's a starting point for any business. So I think this is a great way to sort of frame it for a startup, right? Or a young company, or even a solopreneur who's trying to figure out, hey, how do I get somebody to buy what I'm selling, whether it's a product, whether it's a service. I think the best way to do that is to start with baby steps. Understand that you don't want to start to do advertising upfront, because you are going to be resource constrained in the first year. So how do you overcome that barrier? So you start in today's world, it's a lot easier, where you have a website. That's a starting point. It has to have content. It has to have content that is searchable. And in today's world with AI and the LLMs, what used to be extremely important before ChatGPT launched in late 22, you needed search engine optimization, which would have been the top priority with the content, because your content needed keywords, and that's where I would have started. Fairly quickly, within a couple of months, as soon as you had a client or two, start building your customer testimonials, because it's your customers' validation that you are who you are, and people can trust you. And use that also for a little bit of public relations, because that allows you to sort of spread the word. It takes your client testimonial out externally. And public relations is not just about clients. It can also be about your expertise in a particular area. So if you're vibe coding a new product, right, and you really love what you've built and you know that space well, you can be offered as an expert on that particular topic or that particular subject area to the media, because the media needs people who can be quoted. They need them on quick turnaround time. And a lot of larger businesses, of course, there's large comms teams that run traffic on that. They are not able to respond quickly. So that's where startups can get an opportunity. And then there's a lot of startup focused publications, digital online platforms, podcasts like yours that do a whole variety, right? You do startups, but you also have large folks from other larger companies. And I think there is way more opportunity today to get PR than there was 25, 30 years ago. And so definitely leverage that, because that is the best part of building marketing, is getting third party credibility. That's what we're doing, right? I'm on this podcast because I've built a platform called CambrianEdge.ai that appeals to marketers. But this is a conversation where people can learn more about me, and I would highly recommend going on podcast. That's powerful, because it allows you to talk about not just the product, because that's actually less of a story. It's about who I am as a person, my experience, and I can share that with the world. And I think that's the power of PR, because it is about storytelling at the end of the day. Uh, the first year you do those three, four things, you are off to a good start, and it does not constrain your resources. Advertising should kick in when you have enough revenues to start building some digital ad spends. Now you have to choose, right? If you're a B2B company, uh, there's a fantastic amount of research that comes out of the Ehrenberg Institute, which is in Australia, in Adelaide, and a professor Byron Sharp, who's written a book on this. But there are other marketing experts which say that there is this 95-5 rule in B2B marketing, which is at any given point of time, only 5% of your buyers are in the market to buy something. The other 95% are quietly researching, thinking about what product to look for, if it's a good fit or not. But if you are not communicating to that 95%, your brand doesn't exist. So you would narrow your thing. And that's why for a lot of CEOs, a lot of people who want exact outcomes immediately on sales, they oftentimes don't understand marketing. Marketing is about building a brand for the long term, right? And I say brands are like Rome, it wasn't built in a day. But unfortunately, brands can be destroyed in a day. And so you have to be mindful of that. And that's why you need to build trust and credibility.
Incredible. Just a list of amazing things there. You know, sometimes I try to make notes, but when I do that, Harjiv, I sometimes lose track of what the speaker is saying. I haven't
Right.
found the right balance. So I err on the side of not jotting anything down and relying on my memory. So I'm going to go with some of the things that I do remember from what you listed there. A number
Right.
of different avenues for marketing. You said you don't want to wait till the product's ready because you want to start understanding a lot of these things, kick that
Yes.
off. We'll come to the viability of something like that. A lot of us appreciate that it needs done. It's never a doubt in our minds, even when we are building that software. It's what
Yes.
we are able to do or what we can afford to do, both in terms of dollars and in terms of time that we need to spend on these items as well. So let's say
Yes.
B2B products, you mentioned a number of things. Content, right? Can I say the crux of, you mentioned podcasts, you mentioned articles, you mentioned PR. Is the crux of everything here content of some kind, or is it something? I have a question, but I want to make sure I understand this. Is it
Sure.
mainly content and around content, Harjiv, or is the crux also something that's outside of content itself?
So a large part of the early marketing that you do will be content creation, because it's like putting a signpost outside your house with an address. That's a website. The content on the website could be done in two or three formats, and each of them have their own technical nuances. And actually, what I'll do is I will add you to CambrianEdge.ai. You will see how easy it is, and I will take you through it anytime in the next coming week. So creating content has become so easy with AI, right? But where the human experience, I think, and marketing experience is very powerful is it has to have some oversight. Now, you could create content that are blogs that are great because they'll be keyword optimized. And in today's world, you would frame it as a FAQ because you want to be picked up by the LLMs, because it's the agentic world that's going to discover you more and less it will be humans searching for it directly, right? So while there is a combination of both SEO, AEO, and GEO still going to be around for a while, I think that ratio, I was reading somewhere, the growth of AEO, GEO in the last year has been like phenomenal. I think today, from 0 2 years ago, nearly 27 or 28% of search is driven by the LLMs, or discovery is driven by the LLMs. And I think so. You want to get your content in the right format. So that's the technical part. But the content should be about your product and how do you make that product help your customers solve problems. So your testimonial is the other kind of content. And then from your blog or from a press release that you craft, you could take out social media tiles, right? You could pick up, and at CambrianEdge.ai, all of this becomes very easy. What I'm describing would have been done by different teams pre AI. you can do this alone, and you can
Okay.
and you can post it and amplify it right from CambrianEdge.ai. And I'll show you. You the only thing where you actually need help is the expertise of a marketer who can help you think through that. So whether it would land in the right way that you are thinking it should, and I think that's where the human part will stay important.
So you talked about, say, answer engine optimization or Gen AI engine optimization, right? Can you speak a little bit more to each of those, and how do we create content that helps us be discovered outside of SEO, specifically by those other two that you mentioned, AEO and GEO, which, like you said,
Yes.
have become all the more important these days.
Yes, increasingly important, increasingly part of the what is the marketing mix in terms of how you amplify who you are and how do you get there. So I think one of the key things to remember is the scraping that the LLMs do of across the web, right? The way they give credibility, and it's not that far off from how Google search used to work with search engine optimization. They needed, I don't know if you remember, but the very early years of Google search, the content was atrocious because their ranking system was not as sophisticated as it is today.
Mm,
I would put a keyword and it would give just utter,
garbage.
stuff
Yeah.
that was not garbage, not relevant to what I was looking for. It's gotten better and better, but the world of Google search was, if I was looking for a needle, it would give me such a large haystack that I could not find the needle. It would give me something that was relevant, but it would give me hundreds of pages of search results that I would have to spend a long time scraping that. How does AI change that? In an LLM search, I can define I'm looking for a red needle, and it'll only give me back a red needle. But the challenge is we are all mentally programmed to do a keyword search in Google for the last 25 years. We're not thinking about defining the needle with the red head or whatever is in there in the right manner. And that context giving for an AI LLM is actually essential, because if you can make that shift, the power of what you can harness out of AI is going to be 10x of what we have been doing with Google. And I think we live in this world where we are straddled by both. So the credibility that the AEO GEO side gets is essentially from a combination of, uh, you know, a lot of commentary, which is positive on you, which can come from public relations. So press releases have interestingly become very, very powerful in giving credibility, especially if they get picked up by the media. And by the media, I mean it's not just traditional media. It could be podcasts. It could be things like a interview that you do with an online blogger, or you could do it with some publication as well, a trade media, because the media universe is extremely large today. Or it could be with an influencer, right? An influencer could talk about your product, and then suddenly it'll spiral, and that's actually really really interesting, because understanding the nuance of that is very powerful.
So, how do we, as business owners, we focus our energies on building the software and creating some content between the two? Like, say, specifically between AEO and GEO, do we have to do with Google search, as you mentioned, search engine optimization, the way we created this content and the language that we used in the writing of this content, the H1s, the headers, and things of that nature, we try to make ourselves visible to Google's search engine. How
Right.
do we optimize our content so we appease these other two optimizers?
So there, I think it's a combination of, putting your content in an FAQ format is important. That's like one of the baseline things. Uh, Getting credibility from your press releases and media outreach is important. Now, you don't have to do all of them. If I'm an early stage startup, right? I just started a company. I'm 3 months in. First, get your baseline things, because those are what compound over time, right? So you have your content, you have your customer testimonial section, you have an FAQ section talking about who you are, and then you start doing one or two interviews every quarter. So you build up as your business grows, and I think that's what's going to get picked up by the AEO and GEO side of what you're trying to do. But at the same time, your content, a blog or a thought leadership piece, can actually also power the SEO side, because we're still straddling both sides, and I think that'll continue because Google is a very large player even in the LLM side with Gemini, and I think if you go into Google search today, you get both the LLM answers as well as the search. And I still use search on Google, so it's not as if it's completely gone out of my system. And I think a lot of people today are realizing the power of getting the targeted red needle versus the broad haystack of answers on Google search. But I think we'll have a transition period over the next few years while this sort of gets to where it needs to be. Because, I think one of the most interesting reports I read about a month and a half ago, Deloitte came up with a 2026 AI in 26 report. While 80% of organizations have an AI mandate, large enterprises across the board, only 10% of them are actually using it in the manner that it needs to be used. And I see this even in our beta users, some very large companies. And, they're using a single LLM as an individual is a great way to build up your AI literacy and fluency. But the real power of AI will come from a team using AI on a foundational structure of an AI native platform. So I think that is where the world is going to head. And I think as people learn more about how AEO, GEO is going to play a role, in fact, a lot of clients ask us that, hey, what do I need to change my website? I'm like, yes, you do, but you have to, gradually build towards it. You're not going to suddenly revamp everything. So especially companies that have been around 10, 15, 20 years, that transition takes time. And I think the more important transition is change and behavioral change of people to adapt to this new way of living in with this type of technology.
You said earlier, a few minutes ago, that there's if you want to spend your time on R&D and on
Hmm.
marketing, right? And
Right.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, what is the split that should be? I know there's no silver bullets. I totally appreciate that, Harjiv. But that being said, no matter what tool we are all building as software engineers, as small
Right.
organizations, we have the same set of challenges, right? One of the niceties of software engineering, I don't know about other fields, but I can certainly speak to this, is I've worked for really large product companies. I worked for small product companies. I worked for really small product companies before I launched our own company,
Right.
like five years ago. Now, the funny thing is, people who have not done this long enough, or just graduating from college or switching careers to engineering, one of the things that I feel like I've sort of tried to educate them is, if you did things correctly to the extent that you're able
Right.
to, there is no dramatic difference between how a really large organization might do it and how a really small product company might do it. Now, sure, the large ones got a lot of money, a lot of people, so there are differences and nuances there,
Right. Right.
but the crux of it is going to be similar. So I tell people, as a product company, we are a microcosm of any product company that is out there. It
Absolutely.
doesn't matter how big or small you are. So the reason I give that context is the question's fairly generic, I think, to a lot of us, which is, okay, you know what? I have several fish to fry when I get started, or even after I've gotten started. Like 5 years in, we
Right.
have more fish to fry now than we had like 5 years ago. So while we recognize the need to spend time and energy on different facets of a business, and
Hmm.
we appreciate that it's needed, we're never sure how much time to spend where. So if I asked you this question for a very, assume a standard software product company in the US, I'm just going to give you some metrics there.
Sure.
Say 3 or 4 people teams to get started with. Now that the roles have become grayer, meaning there's no real
Yep.
separation between a developer and a marketer, because the developer needs to market, the marketer needs to write vibe code, some code as well. So let's say 4 people who are able to do things reasonably efficiently.
Right.
How do you divvy up the time between research, what to build, how to architect, how to actually build it? No matter how much code AI generates, you still hopefully have to write some code,
Right.
test it, deploy it, and then market it and do the whole gamut. what is it split? How should it look like, Harjiv? So we know kind of how to divvy it up.
I think your starting point of any company should start with market research before you even develop a product, because you're not going to have product market fit if you don't have an audience to sell it to. So marketing actually comes first. Then you build a product. Because if you build a product and hope that somebody comes and buys you, that is not thinking about the fact that you're actually building a business. You're building something for passion and engineering, but are you thinking about who's going to buy it, how they're going to use it, and what are the challenges in the existing product landscape that you're trying to compete against but make it better? So marketing starts there. It doesn't start after you've built the product. And I would say that's the starting point, because you've then done and this in today's world with AI, it doesn't take rocket science to get the market landscape laid out pretty quickly, right? Put in a prompt. Hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Help me think through this. Claude's great. I use it a lot, but I use the other LLMs a lot. And on our platform, I have all four, and the luxury of brainstorming with the LLMs to say, okay, help me think through this demographic. So let's say you are in the Washington, D.C. area, and you want to pick, Virginia, Maryland, D.C. as your sort of target market. You have a product that is very specific to that market. You can find market research data on that in a single prompt in literally 10 minutes. I would do that and then say, okay, I think I can solve this problem for this segment of the audience, and this is what I can charge. That this used to take a very long time, maybe months of research and going through a lot and collating it. All of that literally you could do in 15 minutes. And if you know the market, you could do it sooner. But if you don't know the market, you will have to maybe dig a little more time just figuring out all of these things. I'll give you an example. I had an old colleague of mine who runs uh, EMEA for one of the largest hotel chains on social media and across all their digital platforms. And we were demoing the product, and she was saying, "Oh, we were launching a new hotel brand in one of the Gulf countries, and we needed market research data for this hotel brand, and this was taking about 3 to 6 months by bringing an external agency to do that." On CambrianEdge.ai, I showed her literally in 5 minutes that research, and they paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for that. So it's actually become that easy. But I think defining marketing up front is the most important thing, because if you don't define your segment, who's your buyer, you're gonna create a product that you are then going to think about how to sell. So marketing should start right at the get-go,
So
and you don't need to spend that much time.
I'm going to challenge you with one of the things you said.
Sure.
So, when I took these classes years ago, and even using common sense, it sounds like, yep, you need to figure out if there is demand for it. What is the TAM, right? The total addressable market for whatever it is that you're building. See if somebody's even willing to pay for it. You know what I mean? People are willing to use, software there's a sense
Yeah.
of entitlement to software because, a lot of these tools are free to the end user. People don't recognize that Google's charging you an arm and a leg to do other things to businesses. Then that's why they're giving it for free.
Of
But that
course.
being said, people have they've begun to expect software to be free. Now,
Yes.
the part I want to challenge you, Arjiv, is I think, if I'm not wrong, I heard the Airbnb CEO, could be him or somebody else, but recently speak to this. He said, hey, don't go about spending a lot of time and energy in researching the market, handing out surveys to hundreds of thousands of people to figure out what they might need. More than that, the important thing is to build what you have in mind. And this is before pre AI as well, where it was not necessarily just as easy to build software. He's like, there was more value in building what you had in mind and validating the need for something like that by giving a functional piece of software, not fully complete, not perfect, but maybe just good, or maybe not even good, but kind of there, to people to see how they might react to it. Now, that's a very different approach from researching the market, understanding the TAM, and then spending the first dollar, because short of vibe coding and what's available today, Harjiv, you had to go raise money, borrow money, or use your own savings and do a bootstrap funded company like we did to get started. So you're not necessarily spending the time and energy on research upfront, but you're actually doing quite the opposite. You're putting your idea into practice, executing to that, and taking your product to Harjiv and having Harjiv comment on that product as opposed to hand out a survey or ask questions. So why should we? I mean, research has become easier, but I just want to play the if you did play the
Sure,
devil's
no, no,
advocate there, what are your thoughts on that?
it's a valid point. So let me start with two specific answers. One is, in today's world, vibe coding has become easy, and even market research has become easy, right? So let's start there. If you are a bootstrapped startup like yourself, that I don't know if you've taken external capital, and you are not taking external capital, I think your market research becomes even more important. And I'll tell you why. Because the failure rate of startups is between 95 to 98% globally, right? Even the VCs know this. That 1 out of 10 portfolio company that will be 100x is what gives them the creds of being a successful investor. But most of the others, the other 9, don't succeed. Now, you can say that, hey, look, I'm going to build the product and then I'm going to figure it out. But your casualty rate is higher if you don't know what you're building for and who you're going to build for. I'm not saying go do surveys. That's not what I said. I said you want to know which is your market segment you're trying to go at. And that's where you need marketing, because marketing is about segmentation, segmentation, segmentation. Who is your buyer? Are you building a generic product? Are you building a B2B product, a B2C product? Once you know that, your pathway to what you're building becomes a lot easy. And you don't need surveys for that. You need an understanding of the market you're trying to solve for. That is different research than doing surveys.
Okay, fair enough, right? But let's say, when you're using these LLMs, at the foundation of these models, right, Harjiv,
Right. Right.
they are not necessarily creative. And what I mean by that is they're
I get
answering
it.
questions based on the data that's out there, right? They're only going to find out, they have a lot of data, access to a lot of data,
Pretty
agreed,
much all the knowledge. Yeah.
not right, of what has already transpired, and they're going to come up with the best answer that they can based on the question and the way you phrase that question to answer your question, right?
Yep.
that's
Yep.
that's understood. But let's take the example of Airbnb. I don't know how he or she, the founders, could have asked any LLM, if there happened to be that those LLMs available at the time, probably they were not many years ago, to tell them anything about whether this is a viable product or not, because there was no such thing. People did not rent out their basement to
Absolutely.
doing
Absolutely.
things.
Absolutely. And same with Apple, right? Steve Jobs said that, like, the customer is not always right. And I'm not saying go talk to a customer. I'm just saying know who you're building for. So and both Airbnb and Steve Jobs had a very clear market in mind. They were building a product category. In Airbnb's case, and this is marketing, right? Product category is, you create a whole new category that does not exist. But he may not have called it marketing at the time, or he may not have done surveys to test that. But it was clearly a defined market, that I have rooms that I can rent out when they're not being used, and people can monetize that. That's marketing insight, right? That has nothing to do with technology. And then he built the tech to solve for that. Same with iPhone, right? So Steve saw that you have an iPod, I've got my phones, why don't I put them together? And then maybe there's a whole universe of apps that come to it. What he was seeing was blending multiple categories of tech products and putting one out of that. And I think that's a very marketing lens. That's market research, and none of those two guys would have used surveys to build what they did, but they did bring market knowledge before they built those products.
Fair enough. Say, next thing I want to ask you is, as I use a lot of these products, for whatever it is that we are building, let's say I depend on different tools to help us do things faster, whether
Right,
it's podcasting, whether it's marketing, whether it's engineering, whether it's sales, whatever those things are.
right.
Sometimes we don't always find it as easily as we sometimes expect to find those
Sure,
things.
sure.
But let's say But my question really is, when I do stumble upon some of these tools, here is my opinion on a few tools that I've used in different spaces, right? Not necessarily related to the core part of our conversation, but yet it's sort of related. So I want to get your thoughts on it. I go use these platforms. They have a few features that I certainly can or do benefit from, but a lot of it is something I could have done outside of that platform by going directly to a lot of these
Sure,
LLMs, correct? Now the
sure,
main
absolutely.
difference, the main difference, Harji, being I have to go to maybe two or three different places, possibly. The
Hmm.
platform makes it easier and seamless by me going into that platform. But there's pros and cons, as opposed to me going to Claude or Chat GPT or one of these LLMs directly. I go to this other company that's essentially using all of these and solving the problems. And now, as somebody who's consuming it, whether it's for publishing podcasts or
Right,
for
right.
creating content, we always not exactly certain as to, hey, should we sign up for these other tools because they give you this extra added convenience, or do we just use whatever other LLMs we're using directly and have them have use more of them than fewer of them, right? You can, hopefully my question makes sense. How do we, this is more a tool selection. How do you
Yes.
recommend that people go about doing those tool selections? Because there is a, and the reason I asked this question also, Harjiv, is because as coding becomes easier because tools are generating the code, more people are building software, which is a nice thing, right? There is the democratization, but
Yes.
by virtue of that happening, there is going to be a proliferation of half baked systems that are out there that have good intentions, but clearly fall well short of their intentions when it comes to execution.
No, so I think that's a very important point, and I think I tie it back to marketing, and I'll tell you why. Because that exact challenge is a marketing challenge. When you create a product and when you're choosing a product, you're looking at the from a lens of, okay, if I need to solve my problem, do I need something to distribute my podcast? Do I need an emailer list that I can reach my audience with the updated podcasts every week? That's a marketing distribution challenge, right? But when you are the person looking for solving your emailer distribution or hosting the product, the podcast, you are looking to select the tool that allows you ease of use. It allows you to save time, essentially, right? That's why we use software. And when you create a product that is going to help people, the marketing part is what's going to help you define who the people are. What is it that you bring to the table as trust and governance? And not every software that is created in vibe coding is going to survive, right? We know this. The data on startups is very clear. Like 95, 97% are not going to get to the next level, especially if it's a tech related journey. And so credibility and trust becomes very important, right? So that's where marketing kicks in. Like when you go research, just think about how do you find tools, right? You used to go to search, Google search. You would have heard word of mouth, which is actually the most powerful form of marketing. Or you would have, looked at some research reports from analysts saying, here is a bunch of tools that compare, like, say, CRMs, for example. Here's Salesforce, here's HubSpot, here's a variety of more, and there's, hundreds of CRMs out there. And how do you choose comes from who does better marketing, not necessarily the better product.
That brings me to my next question, which is a good segue because you kind of said something I was going to ask there. Somebody, this two people, hypothetical scenario. Let's say you have an opportunity to work with two clients. The third one is a simple one, so I'm not going to add them into the mix. They have a great product. They have a one pretty big marketing budget. Great product, a good budget. Surely there's many ways to make them successful. But I'm going to take the other two customers. One has a phenomenal product because you like the product. You looked at it, you're like, yep, this thing is cool. They have very little money by way of marketing. Again, a generic question, right? Not any platform centric. The other customer has an okayish product, not something that's disruptive. It's been there. Maybe they have a product that's
Right.
okay, all right, but they have a ton of money to be able to market the product. Between these two customers, if you could only pick one, who might you pick and why?
It's a great question. So if I am absolutely broke and this is going to be my first client, I would pick the one with the money and make them famous because I would then have money to go help the other one. If I am late stage in the stage I'm in, I oftentimes choose companies, products, organizations to help, even pro bono, because I just love marketing. I know I can make a difference in the impact their brand's going to have on their business. And I think that's the important part, that marketing is not devoid of the business objective of a company, right? It should drive revenue. That's what it's meant for. But most people don't tie it back. And I think that's where the last 25 years we've created a lot of complexity about marketing. Marketing is simple. It's simple because it is one of the core functions of any CEO, founder, business leader is to build a brand, because then it builds credibility and trust with the audiences that are going to purchase your
So, which
product.
means, Harjiv, can we, let's say the company that had the okayish product with a lot of money, outside of the stage of the career that you're in, right? I want to make this question as hard as I can because I genuinely,
Sure, no, no, please,
yeah.
absolutely.
Is it possible to sell a terrible product
Yes,
not once, twice, but over a lengthy period of time if there's a lot of marketing money?
yes. Unfortunately, we live in a world where that happens way more than we realize.
Okay, so that's the sad truth. Now, let me ask the last part of that question, which is, we talked about startups failing, a high rate of failure, which is undeniable. But what I think is not spoken enough is that rate of failure is less about startups, in my opinion, than about new offerings. And here is what I mean by that. If
Right,
we created a graveyard of products that were worked on by Amazon, by Meta, by Alphabet, and other companies, Apple inclusive, that's a pretty big number. Apple worked on an Apple car for I don't know how long, and they lost a ton of money, right? They
right,
have Vision Pro. I don't know how many they sold. It's like putting a brick on the head. I don't have my money on a product like that. And I think they discontinued the $7,000
right.
display like a few days
Yeah,
ago. That I don't know why they launched it. So the thing I want to ask here is, let's take a company like Meta. I mean, I'm not picking on them because they dropped 13% in market share or market cap this week, which is terrible. A lot of us are hoping they come back from that. But I want to ask because I think they dropped the ball on the Reality Labs, which I believe they spent $80 billion on. It's like Mark Zuckerberg's pet project team.
yeah.
80 billion US dollars were spent on it, which went nowhere. Now, there could be many reasons for that failure, for metaverse failing, for other things failing. But I doubt, without any empirical data, Harjit, I doubt lack of marketing money was one of it, right? Probably
No,
not.
it wasn't. It wasn't.
So, how do we attribute, not, I just took that as an example, but in your experience, when, when something like that happens or you read about it, some company didn't make that happen, what might be some of the common causes of failure for those types of products, for those types of companies?
That's a great question, Krish. I think what happens is even Microsoft had a similar issue this week in their earnings. Copilot has been struggling. That was their anchor AI, go to market. They've consolidated that between the consumer and the business side. Let's see what comes out of it. And I talked to a lot of people who use Copilot. They have no idea what it's supposed to do. Right? Similar
Neither,
issue to
neither does Microsoft. No, I'm just kidding.
no. Look, I think the difference is if I'm a young company. Um, a product like that is a fatal error because I will not have the ability to bounce back. Both Meta, Microsoft have, pretty large balance sheets. They can take a few hits, and as you get larger, those hits, hopefully you learn from your previous mistakes and you'll pivot and you'll figure it out. Uh, in a situation like that, I think the role marketing plays is a little less because large enterprises, there's a lot of different decision makers. The product person may be one person. The CEO might have their own opinion. The CFO might have their own opinion. They have earnings and market stakeholders to worry about. So if I'm the CFO of, say, Meta, and I burnt $80 billion and I know I'm going to have to spend a lot of money on data centers in the next 5 years, maybe I'll cut off that product and say, hey, look, I have zero interest in funding this because my investors aren't going to allow me the luxury of this, right? They have a quarterly rhythm. And so there's a lot of more complexity, and marketing is actually only a tiny part of that at that point of time. So I would think of marketing more as an extremely strategic lens for every CEO, no matter small, middle, large size companies, because it allows you to clarify who you're going after, what are you selling, why are you selling them that, what are you going to price it at. These are all marketing questions, and we don't think of it in that lens. And unfortunately, the complexity of marketing is not captured by the word marketing, because you have to deal with consumer behavior. You got to know how the media operates. You got to know what advertising to do in which platform. Do I need LinkedIn? Do I need TikTok? If you're a B2B, LinkedIn makes a lot of sense. If you're a B2C, TikTok is powerful. Look at the New York mayoral campaign. It's a TikTok campaign. It was fantastic. He reached an audience that traditional political campaigns have not been able to reach, right? So I think great successes can happen even without a lot of money being spent from a marketing lens. But the best businesses with a lot of budget will also fail because the product itself was not ready to go to market, right? So product research and understanding that becomes very important. But also over serving can be very painful, because you might not pull off what Brian Chesky and Steve Jobs did if that's what uh, you're going to only depend on. I think that's a very important point you brought up earlier, and I think founders usually know their business. They know the market that they're in. They may not frame it in the way I'm framing it as a marketer, but I think most founders have a sense of who they're making it for, right? They may not have done the in-depth research, but as long as they're clear that this is the person I'm going to sell to, it is so much easier to do marketing then, because then I can tell you all of the vehicles to get you to that point.
My last question for you, and I'm going to let you ask me any questions that you want to ask me as well, Harjiv. But one of my last questions, maybe I have one more, but the very last, the second last one is
Sure.
the type of content that needs to get created. Again, this is a broad question, and I'll give you some context to the question. I go back to a video I saw for a little bit, not the whole 30 minutes, of an Indian guy who goes to a Costco. I mean, I don't shop at a Costco, at least I don't go there. Uh, he had walked around the aisles, or it was his wife, I'm not sure. One of them, they take the camera, pull the product out, show the name of the product, the price, put it back on the shelf, and then go to the next product. That's an Indian product sold at the Costco, and it's a 30-minute video. I was like, okay, I'm surprised. I mean, there's nothing to be surprised about, all kinds of video being created, to each their own. More power if you want to do it. I could never do that, because to me, that was just in my perspective. No, someone couldn't pay me to create that video because it's just boring for me.
Of course, yeah.
It takes a lot of pain. To having a conversation is very interesting. I learned a bunch from Harjiv today on market. I'll take this as an example. When we go to publish content, as much effort as we put personally and professionally, Harjiv, to create
Right,
rich
right.
content, the number of views that show up on a Costco video with somebody walking around the aisles and picking out a product, which I could go to Costco.com and do it in all of 60 seconds, but maybe there
Right.
is an audience for that. And I saw that there were 4 million views within the first 24 hours. And I'm like, wow, maybe that's what I should be doing, right? The question I have is, should content that's created be relevant to the product you're selling because you're educating at the time you're selling? Or can you create arbitrary, unrelated content and have people recognize your brand and then sort of educate them about what you might be selling? Is there like a good or a bad approach?
It's not a good or bad thing. It's more about mental availability, is what the Ehrenberg Institute researchers talk about. We live in an extremely noisy world, right? We're constantly bombarded with messages and viral videos and things like that. And I think the content distribution should be thought through carefully. So if your audience is B2B, that's important to know, okay, which are the channels that would work better. But I think there's a role for something like the Costco video you referenced, because it breaks through the noise of what we in the B2B side or B2C side will be looking from our lens of, okay, I want to be on, say, Facebook or Instagram, but this one video suddenly hits, right? None of us can predict what would hit, but we know in marketing over the years that some things are important, and that's where the whole mental availability piece is important. In those 4 million views, there's probably people who would have picked up something on a B2B side as well, right? It's not as if it's a easily definable audience, because all of us, I sometimes go into the Facebook reels. I sometimes go into I spend more time on Twitter and LinkedIn, but I also go into Instagram. I mean, that's, as a marketer, I have to know these platforms. What is the kind of content, and they all produce different types of content, right? Now you could, instead of you going and doing this sort of video, get an influencer on B2B tech and have him or her do this for you. They already have built the audience, so you don't have to do that. So I think there's interesting ways to play that same game without having to do it yourself.
So, in other words, just to get closure on that, should content be relevant to the product, or is it okay if it's unrelated? What if you have to do
Not
one or the
always.
other?
Not always.
Not always. Okay.
And I'll use the 24 presidential campaign as an example. How relevant was any of the message for a voter's life across the campaign? And this is true in most presidential campaigns, right? They play on emotion. Every presidential campaign is about, like, if you look at the taglines, uh, you know, uh, President Trump uses "Make America Great Again." President Obama used "Yes, we can," and it is a very simple message. And the most powerful thing anybody can do, any founder, any startup can do, is to find your message. But that message is not as easy to find because it has to resonate with the audiences. That's why I say you got to know your audience, you got to know your market segment, and it has to appeal to them, because at the end, if they're your first segment that buys before you expand and become a large business, then you got to appeal to them in some way, right? And presidential campaigns are about as broad as you can get in a market segment. It's the entire country that you're targeting, but most people know, based on party affiliation, these are the Democrats, Republicans, or Independents, and
Software
most
broad.
elect. Sorry.
Sorry, Harjiv, is software broader though? Because even with a broad campaign like a presidential campaign, you at least have the luxury of 50 states and the people who speak a certain language. But software, to me, that was actually going to be a question. I forgot to ask that, which is I might ask you for what it's worth right here because it's related to what you
Sure,
just said
sure.
there. With software, you sometimes, a lot of times, you end up building a product or that solves a generic problem. So you, as the creator, now has agreed, if you will, to appease the appetite of all the humans on planet Earth, right? You want to satiate everyone's hunger because you think that you have this food that everyone can and will eat. But the thing is, even if people can eat what you're making, the whole world can, you don't have anywhere close to the budget to have the reach to get this food in the hands of everybody in the world. So you have to make sure you pick the person you want to put the food, sell the food to. Any advice? That would be the last thing I promise. Any advice to us as engineers and founders who build these generic products and solutions and then figure, opening a restaurant in a neighborhood, to me, it's not easy, but I think it's easier to market because I live in Northern Virginia. I live in a neighborhood. If there's a fair number of Indian people who live in this neighborhood. So if I'm opening an Indian restaurant, I know whether I should serve vegetarian or otherwise,
Sure.
right? I have some idea to scope it down because I'm only serving people in the 10-20 mile radius, but software has no radius. So is it
Global.
so
Yeah.
what are some pitfalls that you think we should avoid as folks who are building software to serve the world?
So I think the most important thing in any marketing is, don't sell the software. You're solving a problem for a customer. That's
Beautiful.
Your customer is the hero, not the software. And you have to solve for that. And I'll tell you a story from 100 years ago. Uh, there's a guy called Edward Bernays who was Sigmund Freud's nephew, and he is known as the father of PR. It's a great story. He was hired by the CEO of an American tobacco company, and this was in the late 20s, just around the cusp of this when the market crashed in 29, and it was around the corner from April 1st, 1929. And the CEO asked him, he said, "Look, man, I've got every person male who smokes, and I've maxed out my potential smokers. So who am I going to sell to, right?" Women in 1929 were not smoking as publicly because it was frowned upon as a cultural thing at the time, and it was one of the biggest challenges for the tobacco company CEOs. Like, how do I like broaden my market? He knew that women, if they started smoking, would double his market share, right? Like he could expand and sell a whole
Right.
bunch of brands into that. And he basically asked Bernays. Bernays had done a lot of work in propaganda during World War One, so he was an expert in consumer psychology. He knew what messages worked and what didn't work, and so he came up with an idea. In fact, we're testing something out next week here in New York, a very similar thing, but for April Fool's Day for our product. And it was he told his secretary, he's like, get about 20 people from your circle. And remember, in the late 20s, there was still a massive amount of push for women's suffrage, right? For voting rights for women. And he said, we're all going to walk down, he's going to make all of these friends of his secretary walk down Fifth Avenue on April 1st. He invited a few reporters from the New York Times and several other, I think it was Associated Press, which was a wire service, and said, all of you light up your cigarettes. And it was called the Torches of Freedom March. It got nationwide coverage. It led to the launch of a brand called Lucky Strike, which still exists. Imagine, it was a creative idea, but it was a directly focused marketing thing that drove business. And Lucky Strike still exists. Women smoke, although smoking in the last 20-25 years has also come down dramatically, but it's not gone. It's still a very profitable business. I mean, they've
Mhm.
adapted to vaping, and so understanding how to frame that uh, in the right messaging is really where marketing can be phenomenally powerful. And I think not selling the product, but selling the solution is the most important thing that I can share. I think all of us love what we build, but really it's the problem you're solving is actually more important to the person who's going to buy.
I think beautiful, right? I mean, it's you're seriously there. This is amazing. I don't have any more questions. So, any questions that you want to ask me, Harjiv?
What are you struggling with in marketing? How can I help you?
I'll tell you the in general, right? Not just me, but even as me talking to other people, what I've seen a lot of our challenges have been. Time is the number one challenge for a lot of us.
Of
Uh,
course.
and money, sure, there's money that goes with it as well, because as a startup, as we spend money on different things, we use a lot of that money towards building software, because that's
Mhm.
that's our core business. So naturally, not intentionally, but inadvertently, we try to not focus enough on everything else. That's for multiple reasons. One is because
Of
we
course.
honestly sometimes don't know what those other things are. And other times, developers aren't built for that necessarily, right? Even to create
Right.
this podcast, if I ask somebody else in the team to create it, they'd be like, nope, I don't want to be on camera. I don't want to talk about this, that, or another, right? So there's only one person who may want
Course.
to actually end up doing it. So
Right. Right.
there are a lot of these challenges, right? So there are some personality challenges, some currency or dollar investment or expense
Sure.
related challenges, time related challenges, and the need to keep up to speed with how you're building software. That comes, I want to say it hopefully comes naturally to a lot of us developers, but but that's easier said than done. As technology is changing ever so rapidly, you want to make sure you're building the right things and solving the right problems, and the problems, right or wrong, is directly related to your ability to solve that problem, right? The problem could
Absolutely.
exist in reality, but if I'm
Absolutely.
not well equipped to solving those problems, then that's actually the wrong problem for me to solve. I would rather solve the wrong problem that I'm good at solving than the right problem that I'm not good at solving, right? The way I actually see it. So
Right.
combination of all of these things presents a plethora of challenges, not just in marketing, right, Harjiv? It's also in sales,
Of
it's in
course.
advertising, it's in engineering, it's in deployment, it's in hiring, it's in conferences. Going to conferences and spending time, you wonder, should I spend a half a day going to DC, or can I not do it? Because you go there, and I've been to a lot of conferences where I'm supposed to network with people, but I'm actually a fairly chatty person, but I can talk with no agenda. But when you put
Right.
an agenda on my lap, I cannot walk into a table. So I will tell you one little story. Right? I was at a conference in DC with all the Fortune 500 CEOs and really incredibly nice, smart, accomplished people. I was there because my wife says, "Chris, you got to go. It's not just building it; you got to go. People have to see that you exist." So I go there. I'm like, you know what? I barely even have a suit. I'm lazy to wear it. I just wear this, and I go there. I'm the only one who's dressed this way. And then you stand in the corner. You're just standing there. I really don't drink much. I don't eat meat, so there's a lot of fancy lobsters and stuff. I was just standing quietly in the corner. Somebody walked up to me. Is like, see that you're standing by yourself. What do you do? And then I told him what we do as a company. And he was like, rather than expect somebody to walk all the way from here to there and ask you what you're doing, wouldn't the purpose of your visit here have been to do the
The
exact thing?
opposite.
Right? The opposite, right? Essentially, I really appreciated what he said. He runs a large data center, the CEO of one of those companies, and I'm like, yep, I appreciate that advice. And he told me one other thing, which is, he said, Krish, leave everyone with a nice story, because they might forget you, they might forget your product, but they're never going to forget those stories. So it's important to have one. Either it's real ones, or I figured it could be like what Kramer did in Seinfeld. I don't know if you've seen that, where Peterman tries to buy Kramer's stories and sells it off as his own stories. But regardless, you've got to do those things. So the answer to your question, Harjiv, is not being the person or the team that's equipped to doing the things that you're generally not built to do, right? If you ask me to build software, I would be happy to do it even if I don't know exactly the tools or the languages that I'm going to be using. But when you ask me to spend time on something else, I'm generally okay
Of
as a
course.
person, but not everybody is in my team as well. So that is our
Sure.
set of suite of challenges. Not one, not two. There's like n number of challenges outside of engineering, essentially.
So what that data center CEO told you is spot on. Never let facts come in the way of a good story. And that's the essence of how you engage in an event like that, right? Because it is all of marketing is about storytelling. It's about having an emotional connection. I mean, I mean, you're from India. I grew up in India. We are an oral culture. We barely recorded most of our living history, right? It was only post, in the last 700, 800 years that that recording took place. India is about stories. Look at Bollywood. Look at, Bollywood is the most prolific film industry in the world. Dollar wise, it's Hollywood, but really, and Bollywood's just not Hindi movies, right? You've got movies down in Tamil Nadu, you've got, in Andhra. It is one of the most prolific storytelling parts of the world. It is in you, my friend. You can find that story. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you.
You haven't found that marketer in you, but I can guarantee that, just think about it, right? There is something in our lives that has been a trigger for who we are. Find that. You have an immigrant story. You came to this country. You came to study here. That's a great story in America. That's the story of America. You got to tie it in, and you'll have a great story to tell.
And it's very relevant as well, right? In this day and age, a lot of these stories
Absolutely,
fairly
absolutely.
become. No, totally, totally appreciate that. I really enjoyed learning everything that you've shared with us, Harjiv. And a lot of us in our audience is also in the space of building software. But
Right.
what's the point in building anything if you don't end up selling it, correct? And you talked about the artist, right? The rich one versus the other one. I mean, maybe they both are equally good. Maybe the other one's probably even better, right? But it does not
Right.
matter, because if you don't make that leap, and I'll say one more thing, which is, I'll say it in my native tongue, Tamil, and then translate that in
Sure.
English.
Sure.
There's many changes you have to make as a person to run a business, right? I mean, you can't live within your personality. You don't have a comfort zone. You can't afford to have one. There's one thing I think I've taken a step as towards marketing, for what it's worth. And I'll say that in Tamil, the words first, and then
Right.
I'll translate that in English. It's called Vekkam, Manam, Sudu, and Sorana. 4 words, right? What it means is, the crux of what that means is not having shame, being shameless. Whether you prospect on LinkedIn, send a sales message to somebody that you
Right.
don't know, it still takes us an incredible amount of time before we hit the send button. But I've learned that you've got to be able to walk into a group of people at a networking event, be shameless about quote unquote interrupting the table, because that's not even called interruption, because that's the whole purpose of those networking events. I'll say that I've tried to make some changes to make that happen, but will it ever become my comfort zone? Not in 100 years. So I think one thing I've learned, or continue to learn, Harjiv, is you've got to be pretentious to yourself in your personality, because your
Right.
true personality might preclude you from not doing things that you ought to be able to do. So I don't know if somebody is listening to this who's in that at that phase in their business or on career. As a developer or an architect, I would say the challenges that you're thinking you're going to have
Right.
are still going to be there, but there's going to be a number of other things that you never think are difficult or are going to be challenges that are going to really test the core of your metal,
Yeah.
that will certainly be there. That's at
Right.
least that's what I've learned over the last 5 years. Yeah.
Right. And I think I'm glad you shared that Tamil quote. And for audiences that don't realize this, Tamil is one of the oldest languages in the world, 2,000 plus years. It has also got a lot of wisdom in it.
Lovely. And if you ever want to come back and do a demo where we can dig deeper into the
Sure.
product, I'm welcome to have you as well. So
Would
my
love to.
last thing I want to ask you, say you're going out for dinner. Today is Friday, not a good day as well. What would your order be? And you have to name 3 dishes for an appetizer, one for an entree, and one for dessert. They don't have to be all part of the same cuisine, but just name one in each of those categories.
So I am actually going for dinner with my family, and
Okay.
the appetizer I know is kale salad, and my main course is a spicy rigatoni with sausage, and the dessert. Oh my God, good cheesecake is always good.
Okay. And you said you live in New York City?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay. Yep. So I mean, there's probably a million places you can go to, and uh, I'm I, I'm jealous of anybody who lives. We love this city, and we try to go there every chance we get.
Well,
Yep.
next time you're up here, I'll take you for dinner, and there's lots of great vegetarian places.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Closing comment, Harjiv, and then we can call it wraps.
Well, it's been a delight having this conversation with you, Krish. I think one thing I tell everybody who's trying to navigate marketing, don't fear it, embrace it. It's going to help you tremendously, way more than you can imagine.
Thank you. We will definitely do that. And folks, I will include these links. We had a chat with Harjit Singh. Harjiv is the founder and CEO of CambrianEdge, an AI native platform that helps marketing teams execute campaigns through a unified system. So definitely check that out. Thank you for your time, Harjiv. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Until next time. Bye bye.
See ya. Bye. Thanks.